Story time. Okay, so this was 2001, and I was a new nurse and just graduated and all. And so I had a patient way down at the end of the hall. I'll never forget this woman. And every time she called me, she wanted me to come down there and pick up paper off the floor, even though I told her who I was. First time I did it, second time I did it, third time I did it. Now, mind you, I got 8 patients. And I had to take care of them as well. One was getting blood, one was getting a whole bunch of fluids, one I was on tube feedings, and I was busy. But every time our call bell rang, I went down there because they would call me to go down there. And so I go down there, and I went down there the 4th time. Pick up this paper off my floor. That's what she said. I'm so sick of this room being dirty. And I said, okay, well, how is the paper getting on the floor? And she said, it doesn't matter. You clean it up, like I said. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And I walked out the room, and I went to the front desk because it was time for me to go get some other stuff done. I sat down at the front desk, and we had call bells back then. And, well, we still have call bells. That doesn't stop. But there's a machine up there at the front. It's a call bell answering machine, I guess you call it. Anyway, I pushed the button when she called out. I was sitting right there beside it. And she said, you tell that black woman to get back down here to clean this paper up off my floor. And I said, I'm your nurse, and I will not be doing that. You put it down there, you pick it up. And I hung up. My nurse manager and my supervisor were standing over there, and they looked at me like I was crazy. And they said, Dee Dee, you need to go down there and do what she asked you to do. I went down there. And I cleaned that up again. Then she asked me to pour some water. There's a bedside table in hospitals, okay? And I poured her some water. Even though the bedside table was over her. There's nothing wrong with this lady's hands, nothing wrong with her feet, nothing wrong with her getting up and going to the bathroom. She hadn't had surgery yet. But she was in one of the suites. So we knew if she's in a suite, she's a pretty important person. So I did all of that. As soon as I got back to the front, she called out again. She wanted me to come pick up the paper off the floor again. I didn't move. I just told her, you'll have to wait. I have other things I have to do medically to my other patients. Oh, you'll get down here, is what she said. You'll get down here very soon. Maybe 5 minutes later, this big man come walking down the hall, nice suit, nice looking man, and went down there to her room to talk to her. And he came back out that room. He came up to the front desk and he said, who is Dee Dee? And I was scared as I don't know what, guys. Ain't gonna lie, I was scared. And I said, I am. He said, oh, okay. And he went back down to that room. Back down to that room. I was like, oh, God. And my manager looked at me, and I looked at her, and I put my head down and just started, charting again on my paper. We had paper charting back then. I was like, Lord, please, I need my job. I'll never be fired. What is going on? He came back out the room probably like 5 minutes later or so. And he said, Dee Dee. And I looked at him. He said, come with me. So I was like, and I looked at my manager. She went. And I got up. And nobody even told me. They were just sitting there, talking to each other. But no one told me who that man was. So we went, and he said, let's get some breakfast. And I went and we got breakfast. I was so nervous I couldn't even hardly eat. He said, get what you want. So I did. Sat there. We talked about life. He told me he had 2 daughters, and both of them were nurses. He told me he was still married, and he loved his wife. He told me that he had a nice home. He told me he drove a BMW. He told me that, it's good to have the finer things in life. And I said, that's true. Nothing wrong with that. He said, but it's even better when you have, skills and, know how to talk to people and, how you treat people. And then he said, humanity. And I said, all those things are true. I prefer to have humanity and be nice and kind and cool and get along with people. Okay? And he said, I think you're doing a wonderful job. And I said, well, thank you. Although I didn't tell him too much. But he was like, sometimes you're going to meet people that, don't like you for whatever reason it may be. And I said, yes, sir. And so many people kept coming up to that table, though. None of them said his name. Not one of them. And I was like, why are they not? But they all came. He always got up. He shook their hand. He said, I'm in a conversation with this young lady here. Let me get back to it, and we'll talk later. And that's what happened. He sat back down, and we talked some more. And he was just going over life lessons, basically. And because I was young, guys, I was young. And he was just saying, you do the best you can at everything in your life. He said, and you'll gain more. And I said, okay, all right. He said, I'm going to let you go back up there and do your job because I see you keep looking at your watch. I said, yeah, I got work to do. I got to go pick up some blood. He started laughing. He said, that's what your coworkers are doing right there. They're going to help you do that. I didn't see this man talk to nobody but me. So I got back down there on the floor, stressed. I didn't have high blood pressure until I became a nurse. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm on 3 pills. I'm getting ready to get off one of them. And I was asking the nurse manager, talking to her, like, has everything been done? She said, don't worry about it, Dee. But come to my office and let's have a conversation. I said, here we go with this bull crap. I went to her office and sat down. She said, what were y'all talking about? And I said, we were just talking about life. He told me he had 2 daughters and, they were nurses and everything. It's very nice. He brought me breakfast and all. And she said, that's all? I said, yeah. I mean, he was just wanting to talk to me, I guess. Tell him about some life issues and what to face. And he appreciated me for doing my job and doing a well job and all that. She said, that is it. I said, yes. What else is he supposed to be talking to me about? Who was he? And she said, you don't know who you were talking to? And I said, no, he never told me his name. She said, do you see that picture when you come in, from the parking lot? Do you not see that big old picture on the wall? I said, no, I don't. And, no. I will now, though. She said, that is the president. And I said, president, what committee? The welcome committee? Innocent. With the welcome committee? And she looked at him and she just smiled. That is the president of this company. I said, oh, snap. I'm letting her say nothing stupid. Oh, my God. No, I didn't talk like that. But I was so happy I didn't make a fool of myself. I said, well, he was a kind person. She said, okay, you say nothing about us? I'm like, that's all you brought me in here. I got to go to work. I want to get out of here on time. And I said her name, but I ain't going to say it now. So she said, well, go on back to work. Everything is done. Your blood is hung. I mean, she went to a whole footload of stuff. And I was, okay, maybe I need to talk to this man more often. Come to find out, that was his mother-in-law. I was shocked. That was his mother-in-law. And I'm so glad I didn't cuss her out because I was on the verge of it. And she never called back out. She never said anything nasty. She got herself up, went to the bathroom. She didn't throw any more papers on the floor. When I went in there to give her medicine, she was right nice. She asked me how I was doing, how I was feeling, and she told me I was doing a great job. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I said, I talked to your son-in-law. He's a very, very cool person. She said, he's nice. That's why he's in my family. And I said to myself, he shouldn't be, though. He shouldn't be. He should not be in your family because you are just as racist can be. But he shut it down. He shut it down once he found out who I was. And he just looked at my skin complexion, went back down there and told her off. And see, so not everybody is racist. And I don't want people to think that I think that way. I don't think everybody is racist. They have some tendencies, prejudices. But he knew what she was all about. And he might have been some way in that past life of his or current life, I don't know. But I wasn't doing anything but my job. And he saw that. And so I don't think everybody's racist, but nurses experience it every day on the job. Co-workers, your friends, so-called friends, your, CNAs, your medical field is full of racist people. And that's why black nurses are needed, because we will stop it. Again, this was my first job as an RN. Yeah. So, thank you for coming to listen to my story. The president of the damn company. What? Yeah. That hadn't happened anymore, though. Take care.